computer. Awesome. So again, thank you for meeting with me today, Nadia. And as you know, we're here to talk about settings today. And it's just an informal conversation, a meeting with designers to, instead of collecting information on an issue, to just understand a little bit about where they are right now with settings design work and discuss a little bit of opportunities so that we can find a common ground for improvements in settings. And I think you've already seen, but I'm just gonna drop here in the chat that we have this epic that lists existing issues, bugs, and feature requests for settings. And the goal of this initiative is to improve the overall settings experience, but we also want to collect specific feedback and specific user insights that we might have across GitLab that will drive the system, the usability for settings. So that's pretty much it. Any questions so far? Can I dive in?
No, that makes sense. I agree. It's a big problem. I'm excited that you're working on it.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of hear from you if you had like any settings design work that that you do had in the past, and specifically if you had any challenges working with settings in the past in Monitor.
Yeah, I can set the stage and share a little bit about the settings that we have in metrics.
Mondays.
Oh, wow, a new word. We just came up with a new word. All right, I'll share my screen and show you what's happening with the settings. Okay. Can you see the metrics dashboard?
Yeah.
Okay, it's still loading, but so for metrics dashboards, we have two types of settings, which are kind of different, but I think they're still settings. So there are some things that you can configure to change the way your metrics dashboard works, like as a product. Like you can choose to show time in UTC or in your local time zone, for example. And these things admins can set for the project. So for that, you would go to operation settings. So you would go to settings, operations, and then there's a section here for the metrics dashboard. First of all, there will be many more settings for the metrics dashboard. So that already is a bit concerning in the context of this specific pattern that we're using here. So like if we have like a whole page of settings, does it still make sense to have it in this layout? Is it really the best option here? Maybe not. And then of course the good old question of why are these settings so far away from the product? As you might have noticed, we kind of sneakily implemented this little settings button in the UI, which is our MVC way of bringing the settings closer to the actual product. So that way, at least the user can have a shortcut like this to go to that page. Now, so these are the settings that you use to configure some of those some of the admin settings for the dashboard as a product. Then there are all kinds of configuration settings for Prometheus, which you need in order to enable metrics. So enabling metrics requires you to either install Prometheus on a cluster in GitLab, or you can have your own Prometheus instance running, but basically you need to configure Prometheus. And that right now lives in settings, integrations. And again, it's really scattered, but it's all part of configuring metrics, and it's not something that you would configure only once and never touch again. Oh, and I noticed that we changed this little indicator to a check mark. That is much better than the dots that we used to have. So yeah, it's not something that you will just enable once and forget about it. It's something that you will keep coming back to. You might be juggling many different data sources here. So you might have 2 different Prometheus instances running on 2 different Kubernetes clusters. And you might also have a manual configuration. And now we also have an issue open to allow users to have multiple manual configurations, which is really the external Prometheus instance that you're running somewhere else and you're just connecting it to GitLab. So basically, when as a metrics user, when using the dashboard, you have to every once in a while go to the Prometheus page, and then you also need to go to metrics settings, and all of these things are scattered all over. So the challenges that we're facing, and we haven't really done that much work around it, to be honest. Like this, we just put this button, the settings button in the dashboard as a quick fix for now, while GitLab as a whole is kind of figuring out what to do with the settings. But then there's this bigger problem of how do we treat configuration versus settings? And how do you make it easy for the user to complete all of this, if not in one place, but then in a way that is very well connected and is intuitive. And then also, and it will be the case, I think, for many parts of our product, especially it's the case in ops, for example. We could move Prometheus into metric settings, for example, but it's not so easy because we're not the only ones who need Prometheus. So if you talk to Monitor Health, they're working on alerting capabilities, and they also use Prometheus, for example. So definitely we don't want to just hide it in metric settings. So there needs to be some way to kind of connect it all together. And I will find an issue for this. I'll just have to like go digging for it, but I'll link it in our agenda. There is an issue where maybe you've probably seen, but there's an issue where we've been exploring a new navigation for ops, for operations. And one of the things that we've been considering was having a link to configuration for each section. So like operations configuration. So now instead of having to go to settings integrations, Prometheus, for example, would live under operations configuration. We haven't tested it. It's like, it was just an idea, but just so you can understand the direction that we've been thinking. Yeah, like whatever we can do to bring configuration and settings closer to the actual relevant product, I think the better it would be. And it looks like our research is also showing this, but yeah, we haven't done a lot of work around this yet.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. If you have done any validation that touched settings, and if you had any specific user insights that we could use to solve this problem of discoverability, and also this mix and switch between global settings and settings in context with the features and specific pages.
Yeah, so settings came up once or twice in, I don't remember, either problem validation or solution validation or both. I'll need to go through some of our research issues and look at the insights that I've documented. If I can find something, I will let you know. So I'll do that. And also I will find this issue for operations navigation structure, because there we also had some discussions, like relevant discussions around settings.
That's awesome. That would be super cool, because my immediate goal here is to find the commonalities between the challenges that designers mentioned in specific areas. Because when we looked into the previous research that Catherine conducted, I don't know, a year ago, and also the recent interviews for the for navigation, there's also a topic on settings. The themes, they are still the same from issues we had, discovered like a year ago. It's the discoverability of settings. It's the general settings versus feature settings. It's the switch of the flow, what you mentioned, options overload when you land somewhere and then you need context from documentation to understand what you're setting up, and also inconsistency in the UI. And I've talked to, I don't know, I think 5, 6 designers so far, and it's the same themes. Everyone has the same issues with settings in their own stage groups. So if you can find those issues later on, that'll be super cool. And then you feel free to either add here to the agenda or to the epic. You can run a thread there. So fine.
Okay.
So, and then anything exciting? Anything that you worked in settings before GitLab that it's makes you proud, or did you think it was a good pattern that we can reuse in learnings?
Well, I haven't really done any work probably around settings aside from those discussions that I mentioned. But I have to say I'm pretty proud of putting that settings button on the metrics dashboard, because it was such a tiny fix and it made it so much easier. And it was important for us to make it also more discoverable as we started introducing some like customizations for the dashboard. Yeah, and just in general, I think it's important that while we're looking at these bigger things that are addressing kind of the core of the problem, real solutions to the problem, I think there's also something to be said about some little things that we can do, like each stage can do to try and see what MVCs are possible to make it easier for their users to access settings. Because while we're fixing the problem, I imagine it can take quite some time. Obviously, it's a really big change, like making a change like this. It's not so easy. You need to do lots of research and test different options, and it has to be really carefully considered. But then there are things that we can do individually, like as different stages. Some things that are maybe less invasive and less risky. That could still provide value.
I agree with you, and I'm gonna share my screen here. So when I was organizing the main epic here for settings, I broke it down into mainly 3 buckets. So bugs, features, and re-architecture or redesign. I called it redesign before, but people were a bit scared with that term. So bugs are pretty much UX dev, UI polish, or things that should work that they don't work right now. That anyone could just go ahead and fix them. They don't need designers to create a proposal. Then features, it's like I don't know, search for settings, pagination in some cases, etc. And then re-architecture, redesign is really this bigger conversation in should we move settings from general settings to feature centered. How do we look into the shortcuts for settings? How do we communicate to users that in their flow, once they finish the Prometheus configuration, for example, they need to go somewhere else? How do we tell them in the UI they need to go these places? So I created these 3 main epics here. And I think the one you mentioned right now, it's really about this one, the bugs, which are, I'm calling them the low-hanging fruits. These are the quick winners that they're not assigned to any stage group because settings, to this point, it's not owned by anyone. But then again, yeah, I think it's really a conversation that we need to have with our PMs to make a push to just the same way we're doing with the pajamas components, or that we did with
Mm-hmm.
the UI polish effort a couple of months ago, do with settings so that we can fix the inconsistencies. And then in the meantime, in parallel, have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation about how do you want to, you know, tackle the big plan of improving
Yeah.
settings. So feel free to look into this. This epic. Now that you're moving to to CICD, I'll have to. No one is going to replace you, right? In monitor, how does that work?
Mm?
With the with monitor. So if I want to be talking to someone about the dashboarding, this Prometheus, who's going to be
Yeah.
covering.
So Amelia will be taking over all APM stuff. So basically, everything in PM is now owned by Health, or rather, they are the monitor now. There's no more APM. But feel free to also ping me because I've been working on metrics dashboards for the past um, half year at least exclusively, and Amelia hasn't really done much work on it. She's been focusing on incidents and alerting. So yeah, probably still I know the most, but she'll catch up soon. So then she will be your contact.
Awesome. That's good to know. Then I'll try to schedule a call with her as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's about it. So if you're, I'm gonna just drop it here, but also at the agenda about bugs
Mm-hmm.
that I was mentioning. Um, yeah, feel free to have a look and add any issues that you might have. Um, and do you have kind of sidebar here? Um, do you have any expectations for settings in CI/CD in Verify? How's your? I'm not sure if you had a chance to think about that so far, but
Oh.
any experience there that you might think this is interesting or this is painful?
Honestly, this change was so sudden and so quick. I'm still kind of shocked, but not necessarily in a bad way. It was just very unexpected. But like, I'm super excited to be joining CI. Obviously, it's a very exciting part of the product to contribute to. And also, it's a whole different set of challenges compared to what I've been working on with metrics, because metrics are still quite early. It's still a
Yeah,
baby in their life cycle. So the challenges that we've been, mostly we've been introducing new features and really focusing on MVCs and kind of on the breadth of the functionality that we're providing. And it looks like in CI, the problems are getting much more sophisticated and complex, which I expected to be a challenge, but also a very exciting challenge to attack those kinds of UX problems.
that's awesome. And if you need any help as well there, I was CI for a very short period, but there's a lot of overlapping between CI/CD, of course. So let me know if I can help with anything. And if by any chance uh, your next big task is about settings, you know, you know that this exists right now and that we can have a conversation. Because another point I quickly want to touch on is pajamas and the lack of guidelines on general patterns. For example, on
Mm-hmm.
the expand, collapse, navigate on settings is very specific to the settings page, right? And I had some conversations with other designers where they say that they would like to have more guidance from pajamas, as in UI, not UI components, but views for, okay, this is how settings look like. So this is how we could extend or continue
Mm-hmm.
in our group or in our context, but also written guidelines about how it works and how it should be replicated. Have you encountered any challenges there, or have any thoughts to share on other types of support that we can give to the design process? throughout, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say off the top of my head, but I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep thinking about it. Um, I think what you mentioned, definitely it's a big problem. So lack of such guidelines leads to a lot of inconsistency because all the different stages are free to interpret the guidelines that we do have, and it just keeps diverging. Like no matter how much we try to stay in touch. For example, in metrics, we're building dashboards, and then we also have GitLab Analytics, and they also have dashboards, and they are so different. And the way, like
Yeah.
it really diverged, even though they're so related. So you think that it would be easier to keep it more consistent, but yeah, I think having those kinds of higher level guidelines would really help with that, and it goes beyond settings, of course, but it's just a very good example in this case.
Yeah, we also had I think we were in discussion for the CI/CD dashboard, right? I think you were in one of the threads, you and Maria as well. And when I was looking at the dashboards, I was like, oh my God, there's like at least 5 different views that we call dashboards, right? In GitLab. So it's definitely a challenge to make the decisions based on, and also for settings, make the decisions based on what the product currently has, which could be either a new feature that was validated, went through the whole validation process, or legacy. So sometimes it's difficult to see and to determine if I'm replicating an outdated pattern or a pattern that shouldn't really exist anymore in the product.
Yeah.
So these are the conversations or the topics that I've heard from other designers, that it would be nice to know that, okay, this is how you set up something in GitLab, or this is how you set up functionality in both the CI file plus the UI, right? I'm not sure if you had this in Monitor, but in CI/CD, there's a lot of things that we configure on the YAML, and then you go to the settings that is hidden somewhere to actually turn the feature on. So there's not a lot of guidance in that sense, and that this is another point. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a very similar situation in metrics, but we haven't quite reached the point where we diverged from the YAML file. Still, like pretty much everything is done in a YAML file. So I foresee the same problem for sure. It's just due to our maturity level, we haven't quite reached the critical point, but I think we will be having the same problem with metrics.
It's good to hear, but it's also painful to hear.
Well, it's good because it means you're not the only one who's concerned about it. The more parts of GitLab are concerned about it, the higher the chance we will actually solve it.
That's awesome. Cool. So I don't think I have any other outstanding questions. Anything else that you think might be interesting could be added to the conversation?
No, not at this point, but I added a task for myself to go through the issues again and go through the research insights. So whatever I can find, I will make sure to. What is the best way, to link it here or just send you links to Slack?
Feel free to add to the epic, or you can, whatever you choose. If you add a list to the epic, just drop a comment there. It's nicer because everyone has visibility.
Okay, cool. I'll do that.
That's awesome, because I spoke with Catherine last Friday, and she pointed me to a lot of research insights on like broad settings research, but it's like this in context with the stage group. It's something that I haven't really seen yet. I know the things that I've done in the past, but it would be nice to in a couple of weeks or days, I'm aiming at days, just group these insights to see how they replicate, and
Mm-hmm.
that we don't really have to redo a lot of research on this topic because we know the
Yeah.
problem exists, right? We've seen that we are users, so we know that there is a room for improvement here. So my goal is to find these commonalities and then put them in separate buckets.
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
yeah, then we can decide what's the priority, what
Mm-hmm.
should tackle first. Okay,
That
cool.
sounds great. I'm really excited that this work is happening.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with me today. And,
Anytime, you're very welcome. I'm sure I will be picking your brain frequently over the next couple milestones as I'm learning more about CI.
that's awesome. I'm looking forward. And yeah, let me know if I can help with anything.
All right.
All right,
Talk
cool.
soon. Have a good day.
Idea, you too.